Hey everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we're talking about episode 3 of the Misfit of Demon King Academy, season 2, core 2. Tell me if any of you are feeling the way I'm feeling about this. Every time that I see Arcana, I am intrigued by her, and I'm curious to see just what her deal is going to be. Is she actually Militia? Does she have a connection to Militia? Is she something else entirely? And why is she engaging with and listening to this asshat that keeps following her around? Because as much as I like her character, his character seems to be able to do nothing but just tick me off. Every time that he calls Anos a heretic, I'm reminded of two things. The first is the idea that one of the biggest problems that people have had throughout human history is trying to impose their own religious beliefs on other people who don't share them. You cannot hold someone accountable for not following rules and tenets of faith that they do not agree with to begin with. It's one thing to say something like you can't kill people. That is a generalized rule that is relatively normal in pretty much every society. But when you start bringing in a concept like sin or like these God selection games, where the participant has not actually agreed to follow the rules mean nothing. Second is the idea of, I do not subscribe to your religion, which is a quote from the movie Help, which is a movie the Beatles made in the 60s, and it was actually said by Ringo Starr, much like how his character in the movie was tagged on with this ring that was from this religion he had no part of, and they were trying to use him as a sacrifice. In this situation, we're seeing Anos be tasked with this God selection situation and needing to actually try and compete in it, even though he has no idea what it really is, what it's about, and who has actually put his name into this. It's like when Harry Potter's name was put into the Goblet of Fire, but Harry didn't do it. It's that sort of thing. And I find that kind of situation incredibly frustrating. I mean, it's one thing when someone chooses to do something and wants to do it, or when they are convinced to do it by some logical force. But the idea that this situation, which apparently is about creating some god of logic or something, is actually being produced in the most illogical way possible, it makes me mad. Fortunately for us, Anos is Anos, and people might be luring him into this situation and he might be playing along, but he will inevitably be playing by his own rules because that's just how he rolls. We see that today, of course, in his first meeting with one of his competitors, and the fact that he absolutely screws this guy over, like big time. The guy tries to attack him and he is like, oh, so you're as fast as the speed of light, and he grabs him like that's nothing. The guy starts to try and cast a spell and Anos grabs him by the throat and is like, oh, you need to chant to use magic? Basically like, how cute. And then, of course, the guy tries to summon the goddess that he is connected to, and she's a healing goddess. And he basically ends up setting up a situation where she ends up healing herself to death. And he blames Anos for it initially, but Anos is like, no, you kept pushing and forcing her to do stuff. And that led to her actually like overusing herself to the point where she like disintegrated. Like, oh my God, talk about something being totally screwed up. And then, of course, we see the big problem with these kinds of like religious culty kind of things, where the guy who has fought Anos wants some sort of forgiveness and ends up ultimately being destroyed and having his stuff be consumed, because of course this kind of religious thing isn't actually about helping people. It's about somebody's personal power and people utilizing the concept of religion, which can be a good thing in and of itself, for their own gains. That's when religion goes bad. Another thing I suppose we have to keep in mind is that although Anos doesn't have all the details of what's going on here, for example, he doesn't seem to know who it is that's actually set him up in this situation to begin with, because it seems possible that whoever did this wasn't actually some kind of god when they did it, so that's definitely a mystery. He does seem to think it's important enough to investigate this and to participate in this, so we're going to have to trust his judgment and see just what is going to go down here. I also like the fact that we got to see more of Misha and Sasha in this episode. We haven't seen quite as much of them. They've made certain appearances, but they haven't really been the focus. It was cool seeing that Misha found the missing text, and it was interesting in general seeing the three of them go through and decipher things and visit with each other and stuff like that. I think it's really important when Anos is doing something to have him have his friends around, because Anos's friends, he empowers and strengthens them to do things, but they also lend him an air of vulnerability that he wouldn't naturally have, which means that they are able to keep Anos powerful and capable and confident while still providing some form of suspense and concern, because while he can get out of almost any mess, his friends can't necessarily do that, and that is something that makes the story work. On a visuals and design perspective, the dragons in this episode are probably some of the most boring dragons I've ever seen. And people are complaining about them being CGI. I really can't tell that sort of thing with my eyesight, but their palette was kind of yawn. On the other hand, though, their lore was actually pretty good. I thought that the concept of them being able to like open pathways and stuff so that people can go places that they normally wouldn't be able to is pretty neat. I also think the idea that they could consume enough people or sources or whatever to be able to actually birth something was rather freaking scary and creepy, but also very unique. My gut is still telling me that there is some connection between Militia and Arcana. I also really liked the statement that Arcana made near the end of the episode, where she's trying to convince Anos that he should leave and that he should protect himself. And basically she's saying that she doesn't really want to fight him, but she knows she'll have to if things continue. And he is like, why are you trying to intervene in everything? And she actually asks him a really great question, which is it wrong to want to save an enemy? And it's a really great question to ask Anos, because he actually has a history of doing that. And I wonder if that's going to be some kind of foreshadowing toward the idea that maybe he will be able to do something to help her down the road, because I feel for her. I don't necessarily think she is inherently evil, but whoever that prick is, I can never remember his name, that is going around with her and that is causing all of this trouble, I do not like him, and I would like to see him get his ass whooped, and I'm sure I will get to see that at some point, given who we're talking about here. But yeah, that guy is, as I've said, annoying. Overall, I thought this episode was pretty good. I'm still mildly annoyed that we don't really know who or what has dragged us into this mess. It's kind of frustrating being in the dark like that, but I suppose at the same time that if Anos doesn't know, how the heck am I supposed to? But I guess we'll have to wait and find those things out as he does as this season progresses. I wonder, what are you guys thinking about this? Are you enjoying the show? Is there anything that stood out to you in this episode? I'd love to know, so feel free to leave me a comment and share your thoughts down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!